Hey guys, in this video we're going to look at prefabs, parenting, and animations. We're going to see how we can use prefabs to create pre-made objects, instantiate them in our scene, and then animate them to make this instantiation or this appearance a little bit nicer. So we're going to start by creating a new project, open the Unity Hub, I click New, and I'm going to say Day 3 Prefabs Animation. I click Create. Okay, so now our Unity project has loaded, and we're going to see how we want to create a somewhat complex object, and we want to save that object instead of just working with either imported 3D models or the primitives that Unity gives us. So I'm going to start by creating a new cube, and I'm going to create a couple of others. And now I'm going to call it cube 1. Second one is going to be cube 2. And the third one is going to be cube 3. I'm going to move them around a little bit. Let's go to the scene to see a little bit better. Up. And this goes here. And this one, cube 2, could go a little bit more this way. Okay, so now I have a somewhat more interesting shape. And I want this shape to stay together. So we're going to do manual parenting. Manual parenting means that I'm going to use a game object as some sort of like folder or parent, which is going to keep the children game object all together. I click on Create Empty. I'm going to call it, say, like custom shape. I'm going to put cube 1, 2, and 3 inside my custom shape by just dragging them. Now they're inside, I can close the custom shape, and I can just manipulate the custom shape just like this, right? So that all the cubes stay together. I can also duplicate it, so I duplicate this whole group of 3 cubes. So this is manual parenting, and we're going to come back to it in a second. For now, I would like to focus on how do we save this shape so that we can use it in, say, like other scenes, other places, or just create it from scratch. To do that, we're going to create a prefab. And a prefab is simple enough. We're going to go to our project tab, and we're going to drag our custom shape, or the object we want to make a prefab of, into our assets. And now a couple of things have happened. It created a new asset, and I see my 3D object here. And we have a blue icon on our custom shape in our hierarchy. And the blue icon indicates that this is a prefab, right? And we can duplicate prefabs. These are called instances of prefabs. So if I move them around, I see that I have those like 3 instances of the same prefab, the same custom shape. So prefabs and their instances have a relationship. I can modify the original prefab, and it will auto-modify all the children prefab, all the instances of the prefab. So I'm going to click on prefab in my assets folder, and I'm going to click on open prefab on the right. And now I can edit the prefab, the original one, right, in this sort of like blue blueprint environment. And let's say, for instance, I want to modify the position of this cube. I'm going to make it here. So it has a slightly different, let's say like this rather, slightly different shape. When I exit this mode by clicking on the arrow here, I see that all the instances in the hierarchy have already integrated the changes that I did to the root prefab. And so there is a relationship between those, right? If I go into the custom shape, and in this specific one, the specific instance, and I want to move this cube even higher, then we have 2 possibilities. Do we want this to go back to the root prefab, or do we want to make the root prefab have this new shape? To do that, we click on the original prefab object, so not on the cubes themselves, but on the custom shape, and we see there's another menu called Overrides. And Overrides is what Unity detects that we've changed something compared to the root prefab. What do we want to do? Do we want to cancel those changes, or do we want to apply those changes? And we're going to start by canceling them. So we click Revert All, and now we see that it goes back to the original prefab layout. But for instance, if I would like to actually remember those changes, I'm going to rotate this guy a little bit. I'm going to click on Custom Shape, Overrides, and Apply All. Then bam, it applies to the root prefab, and therefore it applies to all of the custom shapes. So we've seen how prefabs can allow us to save the game objects in our assets. What we're going to do now is we're going to instantiate them. So we're going to create those new objects through scripts with public variables, and we're going to parent them to other transforms. The first stage then is, if we want to create them from scratch, we're going to delete all these guys. Right-click, delete, and they're gone, but I still have them in my assets, so that's good. The second step is that we want to be able to have a script, and the script needs to be there before we actually create the object, so we cannot attach it to the object. And that's a pattern that's kind of common in Unity when you want to have scripts that don't relate directly to objects, but to a bunch of possible objects. And so we're going to use an empty game object to treat it as sort of a folder, a holder for our scripts. And by convention, I call it app manager. And all this is going to have is a bunch of scripts, and it's going to hold them for us, and it's going to get executed when we click play. I'm going to create a new script, shape creator, and you notice I can type in my search bar, and if it doesn't find anything, it automatically offers to create a new script. So I'm going to click on new script, and it finds the same name, shape creator, create and add. We see that he created the script here, and it's going to add the script as a component right there. So now that we have the script, the first thing that we want to do is that we want to create something, right? So we need to declare that something as a variable. We're going to declare it after line 6. All your variables need to come after the class statement. So we're going to say game object, shape, shape. But it's going to be a little bit tricky for us to assign. I don't know what do I say, equals assets.shape or something like this. It's not going to be easy to give us a value. So what's going to be nice is that if we could just access it here and modify it here, just the same way that we can modify the position here, and we have this sort of interactive editor. To do that, we need to prefix it with the keyword public. So it's a public game object, shape. If I go back, Unity is going to reload, and it's going to give us a new field here, shape, and it has a value of none, but it expects a game object. So whenever we add public, we sort of expose or make visible our variables. And so now to assign the variable, the only thing I need to do is drag our custom shape here. Cool. So now let's say I want to press space, and it's going to create a new shape object. So I'm going to say if input get key down, which key code.space, and the function for that is instantiate. Instantiate takes three things. It takes a game object, it takes a position, and it takes a rotation. I'm going to start with the game object, so it's shape, the variable we have on line 7 here. The position, let's say we're going to create it at the origin point, so 0, 0, 0. I'm going to do new vector 3, 0, 0, 0. And the rotation is going to be quaternion.identity. And that's sort of a shortcut to say don't rotate anything. So now, when we press space, it should be creating a new shape at 0, 0, 0. Oops, I have an error because I have a typo here. And I'm going to click play. Now press space, and our shape appears. If I press space a bunch of times, we can see in the hierarchy that a bunch of shapes actually do appear, but they all look like they're at the same spot. The problem is that they are exactly at the same spot, and so they need to have a slightly different position in order for us to actually see that. I'm going to click play again to stop it. We'll see how all the clones disappear because they were just created during the app. And I'm going to give it now a random position. So to do that, I'm going to go to vector 3, random.range, -2, 2. So it chooses a random number between -2 and 2, random.range -2, 2, and random.range -2, 2. I'm going to try that again. Click play and then press the spacebar, and now they appear at different positions. So that's quite nice. Cool. But you see on the left, they're still like all separate from each other, and they're going to sort of cluster the space really fast, and it's going to be hard to change all of them at the same time if we want to. So to do that, we're going to create them, and we're going to add them as children of a parent. So first we create the parent. I'm going to do right-click here, create empty object, and it's going to be the shape container. So now that I have my shape container, I want to tell Unity to attach those shapes to the shape container. If we're talking about a new thing, we need to declare a variable from it. So I'm going to declare variable GameObject shape container. And I could add a public keyword here and make it apparent in the editor and then drag and drop in the editor, but I want to show you another way to find game objects. To do that, we can say shape container equals GameObject.find, and then what do we want to find? We want to find an object by the exact name. So I'm going to check the name, and I call it indeed shape container, and I'm going to say shape container here. Okay, so we have a reference to our shape container in our code, and now we're going to attach it. But what are we going to attach it? Right now, we're instantiating it here, and it's creating it in the editor in the scene view, but we're not saving it in our code. There's nothing else we can do. Once it's created, it's gone. We don't see it anymore. So we're going to save it by storing it into a variable. I'm going to call it variable of type GameObject Go, because Go is shorthand for GameObject. So GameObject Go equals instantiate shape blah 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 blah. And now we can actually say manipulate Go afterwards, right? We could say like go.position, go.blah blah, go.name, no. What we're going to do is that we're going to set it as a child of the parent. And because a parent-child relationship is a spatial relationship, we need not just to access Go, but to access the transform component of our game object. And that transform, we're going to say, give it a parent, and that parent is going to be the shape container. Not just the shape container, but the transform component of the shape container. And so now, when I start again, I click play, and you see how all the objects are created, but they appear inside the shape container. They're now inside our object, and we can move the object all together. We can rotate it, we can scale it. These are all going to be similarly affected. So this is how parents work. You parent them to other transforms, and the transforms work together. You create public variables in order to see what information you have in a script directly in the editor, and you use the instantiate function to create those new objects through a script. The last part we want to look at is the animation system in Unity. So creating an object is going to give us a nice segue into how the animation system in Unity works, because we don't want to just like create an object and have it appear kind of very boringly like this. Like, press space and back, it's there. It's not very smooth. So we're going to add an animation so that there's an intro to the object. The object sort of grows. So let's see. Animation in Unity is done in two parts. If you go to Window, Animation, you can see Animation and Animator. The animation is going to be the specific animation, let's say like growing from 0 to 1 in terms of scale, or it could be like moving one part, or it could be a rotation. The animator is going to orchestrate all the different animations for one object. So maybe like the cube appears, so it grows, and then while it's not interacted with, it sort of hovers up and down. It doesn't really move that much, but it's still a little bit active. So we're going to start by opening the animation window and create the first animation. we need first to select an animatable object. So I'm going to put my custom shape in the hierarchy. I'm going to go back to the animation window, and now I can create an animator and an animation clip. So I'm going to say create intro. I'm going to save it. And once I've done that, a couple of things have happened. So on my shape, they created automatically an animator component, which we're going to look at in a second. In my project, it created two files, the custom shape animator and the intro animation. And the animation, this is what we're going to look at in this timeline right now. So I've selected the custom shape, and I'm going to add a property. I'm going to say, maybe you want to scale up the first cube, and then the second cube, and then the third cube. So I'm going to select the cube 1, I'm going to select the transform, and I'm going to select the scale. And then I'm going to do similarly for cube 2, transform, scale, and the last one, cube 3, transform, and scale. And I see that they all start at 1, 1, 1. And so if we want it to appear one after the other, I'm going to put it all at 0 at the beginning. And when I click play, they all appear one after the other. Cool. So far, so good. This timeline works like every other animation software you might have used with the concept of keyframes. If you click here, you can add a keyframe. And so you could say, for instance, the first two cubes appear at the same speed. The third one is going to appear a little bit later. So I could say at about 40th of a second, I'm going to add a new keyframe. I'm going to say at this point, you know what? This should still be 0, 0, 0 for the third cube. So the result, as we play it, is that the first two are going to appear, and then the third one's going to appear a little bit later. Two cubes and third cube. Cool. Let's say this is our intro clip, and then once the cube is created, we want to have another clip which is just like our shape going up and down, like bouncing slowly so that it feels a little bit alive. So we're going to click on the drop-down menu here, and we're going to say create new clip. That new clip is going to be like hover. And hover, I want to move everything at the same time, so I'm going to use the main transform. I'm going to use position, and that position should be, or rather the rotation. Let's do the rotation. So let's remove this property and have a rotation. And we're just going to rotate in the middle. It's going to go back and forth. We're going to add a new keyframe. And on the y-axis, it should be 90 degrees. So that now when you play it, it sort of moves around. 90 is a little bit intense, actually. Let's go back to this keyframe and change it to 20. So it's a little bit smoother. Okay, it moves. It's alive. And so now we want to decide that the intro should play first, and then the hover should play forever. This is where the animator comes in. So I'm going to click on Window, Animation, Animator. And now I see that I have some sort of state machine, which are different states and different conditions to go from one state to another. In green, it's when I press play, this is where we start. So when we start, we want to go to intro. That makes sense. The first animation we play is intro. But then once we're done with intro, we actually want to play hover. So we're going to do right click on intro, make transition, and transition into hover. So if we go back to our scene and we play with our custom shape, it appears and then it rotates. And if we go back to our animator window, we see that in the hover mode, it's looping over. And this is what the animator does. It decides which animation should play when. So a bunch of each object can have a bunch of different animations, and the animator allows us to decide which animation should play when. So now we want to create an object. Every time we press space, we want to press space and have this object with those animations appear. But if I look at my prefab here, it still doesn't have an animator controller. So to do that, I need to go to my custom shape, I need to go to overrides, and say apply all changes. I check, my prefab now has an animator, it has all the animations associated with it. I can delete this one, and I can click play, and whenever I press space, the object appears and rotates. I press space again, it appears and rotates. And so on, and so forth. So this is how we've looked into having animations between animator and animation. An animation is a single animation, an animator coordinates multiple animations within a given game object. To create those game objects, we use instantiating. And we've learned about public variables, the public keyword which allows our variables to be visible on the editor, and how instantiating those game objects, we could also parent them to other transforms, that they act together. Their position, their rotation, and their scale are all relative to each other. And finally, this was because we have prefabs. Prefabs are game objects that we've created in our scene and then saved it in our assets so that they actually exist as files and we can reuse them in different conditions. And that's all for prefabs, parenting, and animations.